Okay, let's talk about that Final Fantasy XVI demo. It released earlier this past week, and I got a chance to play through it. It's like an hour and a half long, and I had a lot of thoughts around the game and really how this demo changed pretty much everything around this for me. And there are a few reasons as to why that happened here, but I just want to give some of my thoughts around the core aspects to 16 based on what we saw here for this demo. So if you guys enjoy the video, make sure to hit the like button, and if you're new to the Small Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. So I was trying to figure out if I wanted to record my playthrough of the demo and just show a bunch of footage here and stuff, but I ran into a problem. See, I started the demo up not sure if I was going to even make a video talking about it, and then the entire demo grabbed me to the point where I beat it all in one sitting and didn't think to stop and start recording any footage through like the Elgato or anything. And I didn't really want to go back and restart the demo. I think I'm at a good stopping point now, obviously towards the end, and I'm just ready to transfer my save data over when the full game releases. So I'll probably just show different portions of that state of play where they really highlighted the combat and icon abilities and other aspects of the game. Let's first discuss the demo and kind of how it gets things started and what exactly it centers around, as it is basically a way to set up the story for the main game. As I'm going through, I realized, wait a minute, the demo is 60% maybe cutscene. And the reason for that is that the story is taking some time to build up, obviously, but there is a lot going on here, and more than even I was really expecting. We saw, of course, a lot of preview footage of the icon battles, and they attempted to describe the way it would work with icons and dominance and stuff. But I think seeing it in action and seeing the massive tonal shift here for this Final Fantasy game in particular, it is mature rated. It's very clear that it is a hard M rating for this. We've had mature rated Final Fantasies in the past, most recently Strangers of Paradise, but also Final Fantasy Type 0, and that one caught me off guard a little bit with some of the cutscenes and different things they attempted to lean into. This one, though, I mean, they go for it, is what I'll say, and you'll notice that very, very quickly during this demo. Now, it's mostly here to set up Clive, who obviously the main character of the game, and they told us that you would be going through different phases of Clive's life, and early on he's a bit older, and then it kind of jumps backwards in time to start setting up the story when he's a bit younger, and it seems like he's just starting out after basically the academy or his training where he finally beats his teacher there, and then it spirals out of control very, very quickly, and it certainly caught a lot of people off guard, the direction towards the end of the demo. The gameplay was showcased here, and certainly an early form of the gameplay in the battle system is what I'll say, because you go into it, and it's a pretty standard 4-hit combo. You do have magic, which is assigned to a single button. That was a triangle. And you also have the ability to basically dash in, which is kind of like a dash teleport. And you can combo that into either physical or magic attacks. You have a full parry system. You can block, jump, the whole thing there. But as you're going through, because eventually you of course set off on a quest and you'll be fighting random enemies through encounters. And it is all action-based. It's not even like, okay, this is still kind of turn-based like where we had with Final Fantasy VII Remake. Remember, you're freezing time a bit there, slowing down and being able to do different commands and switch between characters. This is as close to a Devil May Cry Final Fantasy as we've really ever gotten here. And some people have been put off by that. I don't necessarily mind it as much. The battle system for Final Fantasy has been messed with, played around, and they've tried all kinds of different things in the past. The last real traditional party-based Final Fantasy game was Final Fantasy X. Even 12, that's the whole gambit system. 13, you just controlled your one character, and 15 was, I mean, almost an action game on its own there. So this kind of leans more into what they've learned from even Kingdom Hearts. We found out that the studio behind Kingdom Hearts, that creative division from Square, helped out. We also heard that Platinum Games helped out. So you start to realize, okay, yeah, this is going to be a very action-oriented Final Fantasy, and I don't think it really disappoints. I think the action sequences that you have here that are also kind of paired with quick-time events that play into the grand, over-the-top cutscenes I think it's very engaging. It is. Some of the bosses, I will admit, did feel kind of damage spongy, to where you feel like you're going through, yes, different stages of the boss, but it can take a little while to get through them. I assume as we get further into the game, will of course become more powerful, and maybe you go back and you can go through these bosses in New Game Plus, and it's just like, oh, there was a couple of hits and they're done, right? So it is kind of that first time playthrough, making you feel like it's a task to beat some of these bosses. But when you do go through, you have a stagger gauge that you try to work up, which will allow you to do more damage. And right now, I feel like my combos are kind of limited, and as you get further in and unlock more abilities, which there is an entire skill tree set up for you, which does include what I feel like are fairly basic things. The ability to even jump off of an enemy and stuff, that's all locked, and it's pretty easy to unlock that. And then you can kind of see how they are setting things up for the combat to evolve as you get more and more used to it and get more ability points. Now, I had mentioned that this demo really turned things around for me with Final Fantasy XVI, and to be honest, some of that had to do with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth being shown so prominently at the end of that PlayStation showcase, because it looks really good, and we're all familiar with those characters: Cloud, Tifa, Barrett, Zack, Red 13, so on there, right? That universe has already pulled us in. It did that back in the 90s. We're still on board with it. And we've also played through Final Fantasy VII Remake. So I feel like a lot of focus, myself included, shifted immediately to Rebirth off of Final Fantasy XVI when they showcased that game. But with the demo coming out, all of a sudden, my focus has shifted back to Final Fantasy XVI because the demo is just really, really good. I will admit, if the story was not as compelling as it's already set out to be in the first 90 minutes, basically, of the game, I might not feel as strongly about 16. But all the stuff going into it right now, and how it's not as black and white, cut and dry, there's a lot of gray area that's been introduced here. Yeah, I want to see how this plays out, and I'm really excited to jump into the full game when it does release next Friday. Now, the other thing that's been brought up is this does not feel like a Final Fantasy game, and I think a lot of that just has to do with the battle system itself, because you could even kind of say from the tonal standpoint, because it is certainly going for that almost over-the-top mature rating with the language, the violence, so on there. I think the battle system being more action-based is turning longtime fans off, ones that may have been hoping for a traditional turn-based RPG. But I feel like at this time, it's pretty clear, just based on the comments from the developers for 16, they realize that the audience now is different than what it was back then, specifically the mainstream audience. And we've kind of seen that with Final Fantasy adapting over time. And it just seems like they're like, you know what, we're just going to jump in with both feet. It's an action-based game now. And I think in the long run, that will help this game to sell more copies than, say, Final Fantasy 15. But people are wondering at what cost. Well, I will admit, as I'm going through, I'm like, you know, this does feel more like a Devil May Cry kind of game. But then you start to see some of the imagery and, of course, the different elements where they're pulling basically everything from past Final Fantasy games with the different characters. Chocobos are there quite a bit during this demo, but then you even see like the Dragoon, and one of the most Final Fantasy-like scenes I think I've ever seen, or at least in a long time, was the one of the bosses being a Dragoon standing on, of course, this little point at the top of the castle, super dramatic and over the top, jumping off to spear downwards on Clive. On one hand, sure, this is a new venture for the numbered Final Fantasy game, but on the other, it just still feels kind of like classic Final Fantasy. I do want to comment on the frame rate briefly, and I say briefly because it's been mentioned that this is an older build that we're playing in this demo, but having it in performance mode is not a great experience right now. I mean, the frame rate is all over the place, specifically in battles, to where it's pretty distracting. I actually got to the point where I had to turn it on like graphics or quality mode, and it locked it at the 30 frames per second. I mean, the game looks good and everything there, but I would prefer to play it in performance mode and get that higher frame rate, especially since we're no longer doing like straight turn battle gameplay anymore in these different sequences, and it's all action-based, closer to a Devil May Cry. Having those extra frames would make the battles better, but again, I'll wait until the final release of this game next week, and then we'll talk a bit more about the performance. You do also have an icon battle at the end. I don't really feel like that's very spoilerish because they told us that you would get an icon battle in this demo, and in fact, you unlock another icon battle after you beat the demo, kind of fast forwarding a bit, giving you other abilities, and it's basically what they showed us in the preview event, where these two big kaiju entities like Ifrit and you have the Phoenix and stuff battling it out in what does kind of feel like a prolonged cutscene that you interact with. You do fire, like you have fireballs that you're shooting all over the place. You do dodge at times, but it's definitely on rails and set up to be more of this big spectacle, at least in the initial one. And I am kind of imagining some of the big over-the-top, all-inspiring things they can do with some of these icons, because we already know there are going to be a bunch of them in the game, and they've also described you getting abilities from these different icons as you go along, and that, coupled with some of the stuff we've already seen with Clive and his backstory to set up Final Fantasy XVI, seems like it's going to be a big roller coaster going forward when it comes out next week. But let me know what you guys thought about this one down below. Specifically, did you kind of lose focus of 16 a bit when 7 Rebirth was shown, but then you played the demo and you're like, oh, well, I'm definitely all in once again with 16. And also let me know what you think of the battle system, which seems to be the most controversial part. Final Fantasy going all in on like the action RPG style game. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.